we have Bill Murray, who's of course the star of the show. I mean, this movie doesn't work without Bill Murray.
This was his big movie.
Yeah, this is him. This is Murray doing a ton of ad-libbing, a ton of improvisation. But the whole cast itself, it's just all the dudes from SNL. We have Dan Aykroyd, Hal Ramis, they're the Second City, National Lampoon, SNL dudes, those classic traditional comedic guys from that era. Then Ernie Hudson comes in and joins the crew halfway through. So I think the comedy style is the best part of the film. Obviously, elephant in the room, some of the jokes have not aged very well, and there are some very cringeworthy moments between, some of Bill Murray's lines regarding women, and it's just like, oh man, like, of course it flew back then, not saying that it was acceptable to say these kinds of jokes back then. I don't think it was acceptable in any era, but it shows you, like, how different the landscape of the culture in terms of Hollywood, what you could say on TV and film is different than today, because some of the jokes we were watching, we were like,
we looked at each other.
Looking like, oh my God, that's pretty bad, dude.
Yeah, and also he kisses... Sigourney Weaver's character, Dana, he kisses her hand and wrist when she's asleep in a coma.
He's very aggressive with trying to court her. It's just like, that's what comedy and films were like. It's not okay. It never was okay. It was a different culture.
And he clearly had like a more innocent attitude about it, but still that does not give it any leeway. It's like, it's definitely not an okay thing to do the way he approaches Dana in this entire film.
We were watching him like, damn, it's a little much, Bill.
Yeah, like
it's a little much.
He like basically forces himself
into her apartment.
Yeah. into her bedroom.
It's a little much.
But there are moments where Dana reacts like with like a sour face. Like when she says not much happens in the bedroom, he's like, that's a shame. But then she's like, oh, gross, you're being gross, dude. So she definitely reacts that in a normal way, but still, I think that this movie, there are moments that don't age well.
But in general, besides those moments, the rest of the movie is completely timeless, I think. It still works. This special effects still look pretty good.
They look amazing.
It looks like it's from 1984, but it still works. It works for me as well. A lot of the effects are practical, which is great about the new Afterlife film, where they went back to the practical effects with a lot of the shots, especially the monsters with Zool and... Vince Clorth, the Keymaster, and the Gatekeeper.
Also, they're also known as the Terror Dogs.
The dogs.
Yeah,
so,
the Terror Dogs.
The practical effects, when it goes back and forth between CGI or digital with practical. They did the same thing in the new one, which is fantastic, like harkening back to the old feel of it.
And that's what the biggest problem with the 2016 Ghostbusters was. It was all CGI, and it was all just like, I mean, CGI has come a long way, but it just took you out of the moments, and it wasn't scary because there's a difference when even in the 1984 film, when you see the Terror Dogs, it's just like a prop, but it's really there and it's tangible. And seeing it on screen, knowing like that's real light hitting it, that is way scarier than the CGI monsters and ghosts in the 2016 Ghostbusters, by far.
It doesn't seem like a Ghostbusters movie. It doesn't seem like a blend of sci-fi, horror, and comedy in the right way, and I think that's why it just didn't work. It didn't have the feel of the old school Ghostbuster films, which Afterlife 100% pulled off. It felt like it was in that universe.
I also think they spent too much money on it. That movie had a budget of $140 million. And
so maybe make the scope a little smaller, less special effects, and more of story character driven.
Yeah, I think that Ghostbusters works best with a moderate budget, like the new one. So
it's all about the characters.
Yeah, and also the characters, because the more money, the more that the more money that a studio spends, the more they want like big things happening. So less character development, more showy stuff.
I think that's a problem with a lot of films, especially in this era of the 80s, and a lot of comedies that go that route that have special effects or like a sci-fi comedy. The special effects can get away of the story and the humor, but Ghostbusters is an outlier where it just only enhances the story and the comedy is intact in general.
Yeah, and we watched this as little kids. We were watching it, and I remember being really scared of Ghostbusters.
Terrified. I was scared of the green monster, the green one too. And it's not even that scary.
Yeah, Slimer terrified me. The librarian scene really scared me. With
the dogs,
that ghost.
Obviously, too.
But yeah, the dogs horrified me. I remember I used to have nightmares about them. And Jason Reitman said the same thing, where it's like, when you watch this as a kid, it's a different experience than when you watch it as an adult. Because when you watch it as a kid, it's a horror movie. But when you watch it as an adult, it's a comedy.
Because he was 7 when his father was making the movie, and that's actually cool. He was telling us the stories about how he was on set growing up around those movies, and then when he was making the new one, his father was on set with him every day while he's making a Ghostbusters movie himself. So I think it's the only example I can think of where, like a parent and a child are making movies in the same universe or sequels.
Never happened before.
I don't think it's ever happened. It's really cool, and I think that Jason Reitman did an incredible job, like carrying the torch of Ghostbusters for his father, but also for the fan base, because he was talking about how, like, Ghostbusters doesn't belong to me, it doesn't belong to my father, it doesn't belong to any of the actors or the studio, it belongs to the fans, it belongs to the people. And, you know, some of us get the opportunity to carry the torch and borrow the property and borrow the characters in the world for a little bit, and actually hope to make something special and to keep it going. He's hoping that he builds a franchise, and it seems like they're going to be able to reboot an entire franchise of it, because, again, we had a blast watching this new one.
Yeah, and I just love the entire concept of Ghostbusters, because the name is so fun. It's such a catchy name. And it's basically like, imagine like if you had firefighters or battling ghosts.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah,
it's essentially
that's what
it
I
is.
thought of when I was a kid, especially with the pole to slide down.
Because they have the fight. They are actually located in an old firehouse.
Yeah.
And, you know, the pole, like you said, and you know the packs. Proton packs kind of seem like fire hoses when they're shooting them out. So it definitely has that fun blend of like firefighters in a sci-fi movie. And I love the idea of, you know, ghosts are so normalized. Once they start appearing, they become just like a normal thing in the world.
Yeah, I like how they don't like spend too much time on like, oh, they're not real, skepticism or anything like that. And I like how it's, you know, the story follows 3 parapsychologists. They're forced out of their university funding and set up shop as a unique ghost removal service once they discover like real ghosts exist at that library in the opening too. And you know, then ghosts start showing up everywhere all over New York City. And the characters are so fun. Obviously, Bill Murray is the superstar of the trio and the 4 of them, Dr. Peter, Venkman, and they all have like their own speciality, where Venkman is like a psychologist, and his opening scene is where he has like 2 students that he's running a test on.
Yeah.
It's about negative reinforcement to produce a psychic ESP event in a person, which he actually does with the guy.
Yeah.
But then he's also wooing the female student, but like that's a little cringe, guys. That's 1984 humor.
He's very
right there.
handsy.
Like,
but that is ironic how like the guy gets the wavy lines one right, and he's like it's just not your day.
That's what's funny about it, because he actually got positive results. He doesn't even care about it. He's like, he proved his theory correct.
That's amazing.
He's only focused on the girl because Venkman is obviously like the womanizer of the group, and then we have Dan Aykroyd plays Raymond Stantz, who's like the very innocent, bumbling, fumbling guy. He's like kind of clumsy. He accidentally causes them to not be able to bump the rent down in that new place that they get, because like, this place is amazing, whereas Venkman and Spengler are trying to run the rent down. So he's actually a great little comedic effect as well there. And then Harold Ramis as Egon Spengler is like the physicist expert who creates kind of like most of the technology.
He's like the genius of the group.
Yeah, but Stantz is also a great engineer, it seems like, where he can fix up that car.
Yeah, and Winston, who's played by Ernie Hudson, he shows up halfway through the film looking for a job. That character was actually offered to Eddie Murphy, and Eddie Murphy, because obviously he's friends with these guys, he was on SNL as well, he turned it down. But if he accepted the role, he would have been part of the crew from the get-go. So Winston would have been part of that group right from the start of the film. But because they couldn't get Eddie Murphy, and Ernie Hudson at the time was an unknown actor, they waited until halfway through the film to have him reveal in the story.
I understand why they did that. They wanted to build the rapport of the characters. I wish Winston got in a little sooner, because I think he's an awesome part of the film. I think
because he's normal.
Yeah,
the thing with Winston is he's the person that we all relate to the most, I think.
He's like the surrogate for the audience, because whenever they get in trouble, he's like, I've only been here for a couple of weeks, everybody. I don't know about these guys. He's like, I didn't try to destroy the city.
Yeah, Stantz hands him the, oh my God, our fans, Ghostbusters fans are going to kill us. I can't remember the thing that holds... The trap, and it's all smoking. And then he's like, oh, what do I do with this? He's like, just take it. How many butts are getting smoked in this movie? Everyone's just ripping cigarettes the whole time.
The normalization of cigarettes back then.
They always have cigarettes hanging out of their mouths.
The 4 lead characters, the 4 Ghostbusters, ripping butts the whole movie.
Yeah. And for no reason, like it's just like a normal conversation.
That's how normal it was, smoking cigarettes. Like we grew up obviously in the 90s. It was still pretty common for stuff like that.
You could still smoke indoors when we were little kids.
Yeah, but like, in like restaurants were always smoky. Like malls were kind of smoky, or just indoor events were always smoky, like the family reunions or or stuff like that. But like now, kids I never see anyone smoking cigarettes. Like maybe a couple people on like driving past.
In New Orleans, you can smoke. That's still where you can smoke indoors.
Indoors.
Is New Orleans.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's the only place in America.
And Vegas, I think some places.
In
casinos you can smoke indoors.
Yeah, so casinos still have that smell, and that you just see the thick air.
But that used to be everywhere in the world. It was like that. Every bar, every restaurant was like just a haze of smoke, and
every room,
everything, and everywhere, every store, everything smelled like cigarettes.
It's no wonder the life expectancy has jumped up the last 20 years.
For real.